I'm allergic to the chemicals. You're gonna buy me a new computer. This memory popped on my timeline this morning. I used to run a computer repair shop. One of the standard operating procedures was, of course, to dust out the fans with compressed air. We also ran down the entire repair manifest with the customer at pickup time, and this eliminated the, well, you never told me, or why is it $85 when all you had to do was, so we tell her that we tested all of the output voltages, dusted the fan system, at which point she exploded. You did what? You used chemicals on my computer? No, ma'am, we dusted out your computer. With chemicals? No, ma'am, we have an air compressor in the back. It has a moisture dryer on it, and it's also piped to all the workbenches. It's just compressed air. But it's a machine, so it puts chemicals into the air, and I'm allergic to chemicals. Ma'am, no, I assure you any traces of chemicals would have long dissipated if that were even possible. You're gonna buy me a new computer. This is outrageous. No one told you to spray chemicals on my computer. Ma'am, let me get this straight. You want us to buy you a new computer, of which the parts are made in China, with all sorts of chemicals used in the manufacturing process to give you. Well, she huffed and puffed and stormed out. And this is how, after 22 years of retail service, I just can't deal with it anymore. I don't know if she's smart enough to realize that chemicals are kind of in literally everything. Being allergic to quote-unquote chemicals means that you literally would not be able to touch anything, go to the bathroom, not use the bathroom, or do literally anything. Does she just sit there hovering above the grounds ever so slightly so that way she never comes into contact with anything she's allergic to? My goodness.
Stacking so much money, you would think that it's illegal. I'm getting quiet now. Lay low when you're rich, so I'm vibing out. Making out, stack the bread, 'cause
What's going on, guys? It's your boy Scrubby here, back again with another video. Hope you guys are having a great day. I know I am. And today we're going to be taking a look at the subreddit Tales from Tech Support, which is basically just people having to deal with Karens or general people that have no clue what's going on when it comes to technology. I just figured since you guys have been such big fans of the longer Reddit videos recently, this would be a good one to share with you guys. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing today. So without further ado, let's get into it. For a few years, I worked for a large telecommunications company in the United States who delivered internet television, internet, and voice over the circuits. It was my bridge from retail to the real IT work I do today, and while I detested climbing poles, attics, and crawling under houses, it was actually pretty fun and I enjoyed the work. I have the innate skill of following the wire, as with any wired circuit, no issue. No matter what tools you have at your disposal, the real work was chasing it down and knowing where to look and what to look for. I wasn't the top technician by numbers, but I was the guy that managers would call out to deal with escalations. This job was one of those. A guy who'd had our service for a few years once again had intermittent issues, my favorite. Unless it went out of service while I was there was very little I could do besides inspect and test every segment of the wire path I had access to. I told my manager as much and he said to just do the best I could. Fine, whatever. Hopefully waving my magic wand works today. I call ahead, do my usual remote test, and of course everything looks perfect right now. Drive down, knock on the door, introduce myself, tell him my manager sent me out specifically to deal with the problem, and the guy laughed. Let me show you how many of y'all have been sent here to do precisely that. And he opens a composition book and shows me a list of technician names, IDs, and times. You mind signing in? I honestly laughed at the absurdity. Shaking my head, I write down my own name, ID, today's date, and the time on my watch. When I'm done, I count, and there were over 32 other names above mine, dating back over the last 4 years. Sir, unless I'm mistaken, you have had issues with our service ever since you installed it. Why the hell are you still with us? Well, I love the service when it works, which is most of the time, and I'll never go back to cable. When it doesn't, it is annoying, of course. Something is wrong somewhere, and I figure if I keep calling enough, eventually someone will figure it out and fix it. My company was never going to recoup the money they spent trying to fix this customer service, even if he was subscribed without another call for the next 15 years. Nevertheless, I liked the challenge, so I decided to do my thing. When I found the most immaculate install I had ever seen. A shielded Cat 5e cable was bonded in the customer's network interface device, ran to their modem, and all of their TV receivers were connected perfectly with crumpled Shield Ethernet cables as were their desktop PCs. They only had one telephone, a multi-handset cordless base, which was plugged directly into the modem, bypassing any house wiring. Okay, in this case, as they had a wireless alarm system that didn't require landline connection, a beautiful buried shield drop wire running from that to the pedestal in the alley, properly cemented at both ends, and the pedestal was also new, with shiny terminals and new splices to the underground cable. I tested everything anyways and it came back perfect. Well, crap. For people that aren't very technologically educated, basically everything was done immaculately, not very common in a situation like this, and it was all brand new and beautiful. Everything was testing as running perfectly, so nothing easy to signify what was wrong. All I could do was wait for it to screw up. I texted my manager and asked how much time I could have because it was a perfect install and there's nothing I could fix. He told me I had the rest of the day. It was 3 p.m., which meant I could be expected to stay until midnight or until the customer told me to leave. I relayed this to him and he laughed and said, "You can sleep on the couch if you want if this means my gets fixed." Luckily for me, I only had to wait about 3 hours until it showed a disruption. I snapped a run test that basically tried to figure out where the problem was coming from on the equipment. I had the same test before to determine the electrical length and also look for bad connections along the way. It was perfectly flat all the way to the house, and I ran it again and found what showed up as a bridge tap roughly 400 feet away from the house. Bingo. I located it. The downside was the cable was underground somewhere, and per the contract that meant no touchy for me. I called my manager and he didn't answer because it was after 6. So I called the on-duty manager and he said, "There aren't any cable techs working this late. You'd have to put a ticket in for tomorrow." Of course, tomorrow it'll be fine. I won't be able to convince the tech to measure and locate what I captured and the job will get closed out, no trouble found, which is a death sentence for us who dared to call him out in the first place. F that, I'm gonna find it myself. I tell the customer what I learned and that I'm gonna walk down the cable line and see if I can locate the trouble spot. And he said, "Hey, I have one of those rolling wheels that measure distances. Would that help?" Yeah, it would. I didn't have access to that program that showed cable naps, but I knew roughly where the cable went, and it's easy enough to put a tone generator on it and trace it, I guess. He went to find that wheelie thing out of his garage while I drove to the other end of the cable to disconnect it from the thing that made it run. I went back, got my wheel on a stick, and put a generator on the end of his drop wire and started walking from the side of his house to the alley and then down the street, trying to figure out where the problem was. Once I was approaching 400 feet, I came to this large pedestal on the corner of 2 streets. This seemed like the likely location for the trouble, so I popped it open and uncovered the worst rat's nest of wires that I've ever seen to date. Had to have been 250 pairs of wires erupting in a tangled mess. Insulation cracked, bare wire everywhere. No wonder this guy had trouble. Probably everyone with service running through here had trouble. However, I'm only here to fix one pair. So I dive in with my toner wand looking for the chimes of my toner generator. I spent several patient minutes and several shocks later, and I finally located the pair. I cut off the damaged segment, put it in my pocket, and spliced the pair back together. Put everything back, walked to the house, and showed the wire to the customer. "Here's the trouble, sir. It was intermittently making contact with other wires." He grinned and said, "I hope you'll understand if I say I see it when I believe it." I grinned back and said I wouldn't have it any other way. "Here's my number. Call me if it happens again." Drove back to the box, hooked his wires back up, got my tone generator back, hooked up his end, did my end of job test, and got the hell out of there. I kept those wires as a trophy at my little desk at work. No one gave me any crap about it, and I kept tabs on that account while I worked there, looking at his line history every now and then, and he didn't have a single outage after that. No phone calls. Victory was mine, and we had a happy customer to boot. And I went to work to get access to the aforementioned cable maps that would make future jobs easier to work if I find myself left hanging out to dry again. I'm just flabbergasted that they were really gonna make him stay there till midnight. You know, I'm gonna give him a huge kudos for being dedicated to go find the problem. I'm sure that felt fantastic, but damn bro, that company really did him dirty by being like, "Alright, you're gonna stay there until it goes out again." Meanwhile, the manager gets off at 6 p.m. Crazy how the manager can be at home in bed eating dinner for the last 6 hours, but he's still out there on some stranger's couch trying to figure out while his internet's going out. Not worth the loyalty to the company at that point, is it? few years ago, I was cleaning out this storage room looking for old electronics to donate. The storage room looks like a smaller version of a warehouse from Raiders of the Lost Ark. Digging through old electronics, I found an old 21-inch CRT monitor, and that thing's basically the size of a small refrigerator. I lifted it to my shoulder and started to carry it back to my office, and the thing was really heavy. I'm walking through this narrow corridor to my office when one of my users literally blocks my passage, folds his arms, and says, "So I have this problem with my home computer. There's a pop-up with ads showing up once in a while in the bottom of the corner of my screen, and I can't get rid of it." I'm standing there in disbelief, looking like Atlas holding the earth, thinking if chiropractic services are covered in my health plan, and he continues, "So what do you think will cause this?" I lifted the monitor, told him hold this, and handed it to him. He started to grab the monitor, almost ready to collapse under the weight, and I folded my arms and said, "Let me think about this. Are you using Chrome?" He handed the monitor back to me, apologized, and sheepishly left. I'm hoping he got the point. I love this because it's like you don't have to be some technological genius to look at somebody carrying something insanely heavy and tell that it's not the time to ask them a bunch of questions about your home computer. Those old monitors are heavy, bro. I don't really know how people were vibing with technology before we got flat screens and LCD monitors and stuff. A monitor could literally be rolled after somebody like it's Indiana Jones and squish them from back in the day. You gotta be on the lookout. I'm a network cabling technician for an investment bank. It was an early shift and I got this ticket handover from the other night that came from the network operator. There's a switch with this thing that's offline. Kindly verify that it's offline with the visual check. I ended up searching it up in this database and basically ended up finding that I couldn't locate the thing. That's odd. The late shift guy from the night before calls in and says, "I'm gonna be late tonight, hungover, but if they call, the elevator is down." The what? The elevator. You know that ticket about the down switch? It's a smart elevator, but the elevator is down. So where is the switch? On top of the elevator. Ah, okay. Don't want to know how he found that out. Kick the ticket back to network operations and say that the elevator is offline and undergoing maintenance, switch is in the elevator, and the switch is offline. They send it back to me with the addition, "Can you turn it back on?" To gain access to the switch, I'd have to have an Otis technician move the elevator, and if they could do that, I wouldn't need to gain access to the switch. Well, then when can we expect the switch back on? When they fix the elevator, I imagine. I don't understand. Switches are supposed to be powered separately on standard racks. This is inconvenient. I send pictures of an electrician and 3 elevator repairmen in an open elevator shaft, and a picture of the switch in question in a small metal box affixed to the top of the elevator. Where do you think we could put a standard rack? Well, can you move it to someplace more standard with the rest of the switches? Can I move the switch that controls the elevator away from the elevator? Oh. And then they contacted this. Is there any way we could turn the network back on? I turned to the late shift guy, and the game of email tag has gone on all day. Now it's my turn to drink. Nothing would be quite as frustrating as having to explain to a bunch of people over email that no, you can't just go fix the elevator because the button to fix the elevator is on top of the elevator. Well, why is the button for the elevator not on the elevator? Or why can't you put it off the elevator? I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't design elevators, dude. Trust me. If I had a way to put the button for the elevator in a place that was easier to put it, I would have. I don't invent elevators, man. That sounds like a problem you're gonna have to take up with them, dude. Like, I don't know. That's like asking a mechanic why they put engines in a safe place like the engine bay. Sure, he might have a theory or two, but at the end of the day, he's not the dude designing cars over at General Motors, so there's really not much he can do about it. Don't call my personal number on vacation. I work in IT at a company that is vaguely in the medical and pharmaceutical industry. We're a department of 4, and I was originally hired to be temporary coverage for a paternity leave, but they offered me a full-time position. At that point, I got a company-issued cell phone, and prior to this, I used my personal number for the few times I needed to make a call. Unfortunately, one of those people was a technical trainer. She used to be a warehouse supervisor, but rumor is they couldn't fire her, so when the other position came up, they welcomed it to her to get her out of their department. My first week, she called, instead of using our ticket system, to complain to my coworker that one of our printers didn't have a label tag on it with the name. Most of the other ones did, but occasionally they fall off. Also, she isn't sure it's working. The lazy guy that she had called sent me to go figure it out because he does nothing that requires him to leave his desk. I had to find it by pinging methodically. and matching the IP listed on the printer's screen. We have a label maker, but had run out of print roll and we were waiting on the next shipment of office supplies, so I called the technical trainer to give her the name and I'd let her know I'd make a label as soon as I could. She thanked me and that was that, or so I thought. Little did I know she'd end up saving my number. Ugh. Flash forward a few months, I was in a weird limbo of my contract was extended because the position doesn't open until the new year for budget reasons, and because I'm a temp, I'm not allowed to be on the employee directory even though I now have a company phone number. Rules are dumb, but I didn't care enough to argue. It's tied to my account so people can look it up on Outlook. Anyways, I had booked a vacation that was after the end date on my contract. When my boss extended it, he gave me the time off without question, even though I don't get paid time off. I set out my office message on the Teams with the dates off and said to contact the lazy guy or the senior IT manager, and I left my laptop and company phone at home. I'm hourly, so I had absolutely no expectation of work on personal time. In Colorado, I hiked the Quandary Peak with my sister, and she runs marathons and I don't. I thought I was going to die. Anyways, unsurprisingly, there was poor cell service, and when we got back to the cabin, I collapsed onto the floor and plugged my phone into charge. I saw a notification for a voicemail and I clicked on it. "Hi, this is Technical Trainer. And I deleted it without listening to the rest of the messages. When I got back into town, I checked and had no emails or IMs from her, checked her ticket history, and there were nothing. So she didn't call the lazy guy or senior IT, so it couldn't have been that important. I mentioned all this to my boss, and his response was, "I block your number if it was me." Things like this probably explain all his feuds with so many people in other departments. Nothing is worse than work people calling you when you're off the clock, dude. When I worked at this grocery store, I had a manager that would call me all the time and be like, "Hey, I know that you've worked the maximum amount of hours this week, but do you want to come in and work an 8-hour shift?" And if I said no, she'd get mad at me. It's like, listen, lady, I appreciate the job and all, but no, I'm not working more than 40 hours a week just because you want me to. And if you're really gonna cause a problem, I don't care. Stop calling me. Today I gave my little brother a shiny new drive for his PC because the existing drive in his computer only holds enough for Windows, Steam, and a handful of text adventures. I handed him the drive and my stepdad, who's a pretty savvy computer user, happily accepted it and says he'll pop it in for him. Crucially, he seemed a little bit confused about the form factor, but I assure him that there should be a slot for it, and that it's an easy process. After all, he taught me things about computers when I was a kid, and my stepbrother's young, switched on and happening. This is in safe hands. About an hour later, I get the call I was dreading. He says that it won't boot. Now, I'm somewhat skeptical about this, seeing as that it wouldn't try to boot from an empty drive, and now I don't have to ask because he immediately clarifies with, "I put it in the cable and it's not working." The type of drive that he had gotten his brother isn't supposed to be put in a cable. Yes, folks, he put it in that cable. I immediately realized that he has in fact plugged it directly into a spare SATA power cord, and the boot failure was due to the power supply tripping. I then asked him to photograph the motherboard so that I can identify and find where the M2 slot should be. Sure enough, it's under the GPU, and after 15 minutes of surgery, he got it back up and running. Except Windows doesn't recognize it, the BIOS doesn't recognize it, and there's no drive to recognize it because it's fried. Thankfully, it wasn't that expensive, so I can get it replaced pretty easily. Oh man, there's nothing wrong with the YouTube search. I don't think I'm like as tech savvy as a lot of the people in these stories. That being said, if you don't know what you're doing, don't just start plugging it into cables and turning stuff on. Oh man, this seems like a good way to waste a bunch of equipment. You know, the younger brother's sitting there like, "Come on, dude, I thought you had this thing under lock. You're supposed to be the technologically savvy parent." Meanwhile, he's like, "Yeah, these things happen." One little YouTube search could have prevented all of this. It's literally the encyclopedia of free information. If you look up anything you could possibly want to know about computers or putting it together, I guarantee you someone has made a video about it. Sure, you might need to skip 6 minutes in and skip a couple ads, but hey, whatever, you'll get the information you need and you won't have to break it and replace it with a brand new piece. anyways, guys, that's gonna do it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, I would really appreciate you taking a second to press the like button. Let me know in the comments section down below what you thought. If you don't know what to comment, go ahead and comment the word computer down below. I would very much appreciate it. And of course, you should subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another video. Also, down in the description, I'm gonna go ahead and put a link to the intro song along with a link to my podcast, The Scuffed Cast, or of course, you could use code Scrubby at the G Fuel checkout. You get a discount on the best energy drink for gamers, G Fuel, and you help me out. So like I said, use code Scrubby at the checkout. And the last link that you're gonna find in the description is a link to the merch store. So if you want to be truly awesome and get yourself the coolest t-shirt to ever exist, go to that link and check it out. I'm definitely not biased or anything, it's just my merch. And yeah, on that note, guys, that's gonna do it for the video. Don't get anyone pregnant. If you do, make sure they're hot, and hopefully I'll see each and every single one of you guys next time with another video. I'm out. Peace.